I'll give it a go. Hi, my name is Thorben Linneberg, and this is Nadine Linneberg, my wife. We are the founders of Aerospring Gardens. We started this business first in 2015. It was a business that evolved out of a hobby. We wanted to grow our own food in Singapore, and I built some PVC pipes and grew successfully in a vertical system similar to the one behind us for a couple of years. And we then one day decided to make this into a business. And behind you will see our production of the Aerospring Gardens. We have now been in the market since February 2016, since we launched, and we have sold about 1,000 systems in Singapore.
Over 90% of food is imported into Singapore. Singapore is not an agricultural country. It doesn't have enough land or space to produce its own food. So most of the food is imported. We're highly dependent on regional imports of vegetables and leafy greens, and also from fruit from all over the world, fruit and vegetables from all over the world. So in actual fact, there is very little produced here in Singapore.
Is this why you want to produce at the beginning you want to produce your own food, because the food you found wasn't that good for you, or wasn't that?
We found it very expensive. We found the food in Singapore very expensive. The average price of a good tomato from Holland was about $2 to $3 each. So we was dead set against paying those prices, and we did some research and found that Singapore can grow its own tomatoes. So that was how the business started. We wanted to grow our own tomatoes.
Yeah.
And how do you feel, what about the cities and the Singaporean? Do you think they are concerned about this problem?
I think most of them are unaware of the problem that Singapore doesn't produce any food. I mean, we all know that there is not enough. Pardon?
They don't even see it as a problem.
They don't. Well, maybe they see the situation, but I don't think that they see any solution. So why bother about it? Because what are we going to do? We can't farm in this small country. So I think with the Aerospring Garden, we are trying to create a solution where we are actually able to do it. And to give you an example of how impactful we think we already have been here is that by having sold about 1,000 systems with 36 edible plants in each system the last 12 months, if you assume that we have produced about 2 kilos of green, leafy greens, tomatoes, cucumbers, whatever, out of each plant hole in 12 months, that means 72 tons of food has been grown in an Aerospring Garden in Singapore the last 12 months. And that is many 40-foot containers of salad that didn't arrive. So we already think that, by decentralizing the food production, we are actually able to make an impact.
One of our mottos is grow a little of your own. We are not aiming to completely replace buying food at the supermarket. We cannot produce fruit here. There are no apples, no pears. So those kind of things you still need to buy. You can't grow onions or garlic in the system either, or potatoes. But definitely leafy greens, salads, kale, herbs, some vine vegetables like cucumbers and tomatoes. They are easy to grow at home.
Yeah. Yeah, so while we have designed the system for individual balconies and patios and gardens, it is also a very good system for commercial farming. And we do have commercial customers that are speccing out rooftop farms with our types of systems and with the Aerospring. And the yield per square foot with this type of system is as good or higher than NFT channels and other ways. And one of the other benefits with our system in the tropics is that it works as an evaporative cooler. So if you're having a rooftop farm in Asia, you're struggling with temperatures, that's for sure. And our system just seems better at dealing with it because of the evaporative cooling effects the tower has.
I think we need to bring farming back into the hands of people. I think the control needs to get back into the hands of people. I think we have forgotten how to grow things.
Yeah.
We have become completely dependent on buying things at the supermarket. Children believe that apples come from the supermarket and not from a tree. So I think that the next generation needs to understand with the changing climate and the sustainability issues, that they need to understand where food comes from and how it is grown, and value the food system a lot more, not take it for granted so much. So I hope that what we are doing serves as an educational tool. It serves as a way to contribute to their food budget, to save some money, and to also take back some control to where their food comes from and how it is grown, pesticide-free, the type of crops that you grow. You know, some of the things that we grow here are not even available at the supermarket.
Well, to launch the product and the company, we didn't take any help from the government. I will say, though, that there is help and support to get from the government in Singapore. I've been here for 18 years, and this is not my first startup. And I have received grants from the government before, and just yesterday the government came to talk to us about giving us support for our internationalization of our business. So now that we are exporting to the rest of the world, we are seeking grants for that purpose. So I would say not many obstacles in that way. It's cheap to incorporate a business here. The taxes are favorable for us as well. And to a degree, I feel that Singapore is a great test bed for the world for us. We have a climate here that, well, today it's raining, but it's a very difficult place to grow successfully because it's typically too hot and it's typically too wet. And also our clientele in Singapore is not farming experienced. But being successful in this type of environment means that we have a great chance in the rest of the world where it's easier to grow, the knowledge of farming is higher, and the culture is more into gardening at home. I think they're already doing it, actually. So there is a focus for the Singapore government on sustainability and food safety. And so growing hydroponically, urban farming, vertical farming, all of these topics and all of these issues are at the forefront of the Singapore government. We also actually have special programs to support schools in Singapore. And we have sold the Aerospring system to at least 8 or 9 schools in Singapore now. I give workshops for the school teachers to teach how to teach the children. And it's a great educational product because you can simply just take a plant out, right? And you can study both the root system, the foliage, and everything in a non-threatening educational way for children. Oh gosh, very little. It's a 40-watt pump, but it only runs 5% of the time. So in Singapore, that means about $3 per year. And we have quite high electricity cost here. Now, if I was to run the pump non-stop, it's close to $70 per year. But remember, we are only running the pump in 30-second bursts every 10 to 15 minutes, depending on the temperature outside. The yield per square foot for a mixed pole like you see behind us, because behind us you will see both mint, kale, basil and fruiting plants like chilies and cucumbers. We even have passion fruits and pumpkins growing behind us. And so to optimize any growth of any of these plants, because it's a mixture, it's very difficult to say the yield per square foot is going to be X. The only way to really do that is to set up a commercial farm and grow for about 6 months and grow only one type of crop on each pole. We haven't done that yet. But looking at similar systems around the world that grow in a similar fashion, we know that the yield per square foot is higher than NFT channels. And we also know that the quality of the produce is slightly better because of the root health, especially when you grow in Asia. But it is a very dynamic measurement to say that my system will grow 5 kilos of basil per month. If I went out and said that, I would be lying in certain situations, because it won't produce the same in Europe, because the temperatures and the humidity is different. So I don't know the precise number, but I know that the technique of growing like this has a high yield compared to others. We haven't done that ourselves, but there's plenty of studies and research and tests done in labs out there that proves that food that's grown organically versus food that's grown hydroponically has the same amount of nutrients, has the same amount of vitamins, and all of this. This is we can certainly test it, but it has been tested many times by large companies in Europe. And as you know, 60% of all of our tomatoes in Europe are grown hydroponically. So it is a very well established way of producing food now.
Certain government agencies are already actively working on solving the problem, or working on the problem of food security, and they are banding together, not just the agricultural associations, agricultural people. It's also an urban development issue. It is not something that can be solved overnight. It is not something that they projected or foresaw. So our mission is really to put it in the hands of the consumer, to start in the hands of the consumer instead of going in the commercial vein first, to educate the consumer first about the issue at a grassroots level. I believe in coming years, in the next 5 to 10 years, there will be active solutions about growing locally. There are campaigns by the AVA right now about growing food and eating food locally. So I think with more education, with more distribution, more knowledge about it, that it will be in the minds of the common man about where their food comes from and why we have to grow locally.
Yeah, and I also think that if any government around the world is going to make an impact in solving the problem of food security in high-density populated areas or urban areas, it's probably going to be a country like Singapore. And all it would take is that they built one sort of skyscraper in the cloud here in Singapore, and you would be able to have acres and acres of productive area to produce food, and with only a few kilometers to deliver it. Well, I think that the practical reason is that if you have a green wall on a building, right, and you say, hey, why don't we grow food on this wall?
On the rooftops, there's a lot of
Yeah,
green rooftops.
yeah, and on the rooftops, but it's a maintenance issue. What people are looking for now is yes, they want to be part of the green movement, but they really, the step from growing money plants and ornamental plants on a wall to growing productive gardens for edible plants is a huge step in maintenance. You have to change all of the plants out every couple of months, right? Whereas if you have a green wall, you put it up and 2 or 3 years later, you worry about what to do about it. So it's a huge cost issue, and it's a practical issue of how, like if you have a big building, you want it to look lush and green on the outside. Well, every 3 months it's going to look like crap because they harvested all the salad, right? And then so it doesn't make for a pretty city. So I think that is the reason that we have such greenery here. Everyone wants to be part of the green movement, but nobody is taking the real step of making it a productive food system, right?
Also keep in mind that bugs don't really want to go for ornamental plants. They want to eat edible plants. So the maintenance is almost a daily, every second day kind of issue. So you've got to be in there, check if you want to not use pesticides, check and deal with the bugs when they do turn up.
Yeah, I could imagine you have a green wall of a building that gets attacked by aphids, and there would be 1 trillion aphids, right? And it would look terrible, almost disgusting at one point, as the plants are being devoured by bugs, right? So it's very easy to have a failure in such a system. If you have drought for a couple of weeks, if you have excessive sunshine, you can kill all the plants on the wall. So I think that's the reason that we're not doing those steps yet. But urban farming is coming in a big way in Singapore, and it's coming all over the world because there is no other choice.
Yeah. So you think it's not possible to have like every rooftop doing even in the HDB or condos? Why cannot it be like the citizens that grow their own food, at least for this part, not to sell?
Yes, so it's a
Swimming pools and tennis courts. Why don't we have?
it's a brilliant idea, but what's missing here is the farmers.
Yeah.
Who's going to do it? Now, I sell farming equipment or gardening equipment, but I cannot be a farmer that sets up the rooftop gardens around Singapore. So what's missing is farmers with guts, right? Farmers or families or groups of people or even government-supported groups that says, hey, let's change this. Let's set up urban farms in Singapore on as many rooftops as possible with a system that works really well here. It could be our system, it could be other types of systems. But that's what's missing. It's the real action to set up the farms, right? And there is a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes, and there's a lot of companies that we are discussing project sales with to set up rooftop farms on top of restaurants, on top of supermarkets and shopping centers all over this country, and underutilized public spaces like the top floor of a car park. Nobody wants to park there because the car's in the sun. So there is a movement happening here. It's going to take a few more years, but I guarantee you that the Aerospring system will be part of some of these early urban farms that will spring up in this part of the world.
The newer buildings are now being built with that in mind. I think previously when they put these buildings up, they didn't actually think about putting a rooftop farm on there. You've got to think, if you put a soil farm up there, it's heavy.
Yeah.
And the soil, the water, there's no water point up there, there's possibly no electrical point up there. People haven't thought about that. So I think newer buildings are building the rooftops with more load-bearing capability. So currently, when you see that the HDBs do not have that, it's because they don't have load-bearing capability.
Yeah, and that's for soil. I mean, soil gardens are heavy. The Aerospring system works actually on rooftops because it's only about 75 kilos. It's the weight of a person. So we can already do it, but some of the soil gardens that they're trying to install on the rooftops are not possible because they get too heavy. So what they're doing is that they have certain grants that makes it easier and more affordable for someone to begin farming operations in Singapore. And one concrete example is that, let's say that you two want to set up a farm in Singapore. You say, we have a space, and then you set up a pilot farm to demonstrate that it works. Based on this pilot farm, you seek a grant to set up the full-scale farm. If the grant is granted for you, all of your equipment that you have to purchase to set up the farm, 70% of it will be paid for by the government. And that's been around for a while. The problem is now is that the urbanized areas, like up here on top of the squash court, there is a big rooftop, right? But there is no sort of mechanisms to approve farms that are on top of rooftops. So the government is still catching up on figuring out how to approve these and how to evaluate whether or not they're sustainable and legal. But I think this is coming, and the government is already there with the right type of grants for the capital investment of starting.
Are they specific to agriculture or any type of business?
Specifically for farming.
Okay.
Yeah, specifically for farming. This is the AVA, I believe.
AVA grants,
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, there are different initiatives here, and in my opinion, any initiative that is there to create more food production and more greenery and more understanding and knowledge about farming is a positive thing. And I don't care if it's a competing system to the Aerospring.
It can be complementary. Maybe.
Yeah, exactly. And look, we are very confident in our system, and we will take the Pepsi challenge against any other type of growing system in Singapore. I'm not saying that other systems should not exist. Our system is not the best for all situations, but so we welcome any type of system and any type of technology that can improve that situation.
I think it needs to be balanced out with the need for a growing population. It's not just about making money. It's also about accommodating more people. And Singapore has plans to accommodate a larger population, and so infrastructure and facilities like schools and parks and stuff like that need to be put aside as well for new communities, new housing projects. So we need to balance all of that out. The underutilized spaces is where I see more promise for farming. Anything that isn't used properly, swimming pool areas, tops of car parks, places where it's just open land itself, where you can't, it's not enough to build anything of substance.
Yeah.
Okay.
We don't really have meetings, but I think that there is a community sort of spirit that we're all aiming in the same direction. And there are companies and people that we talk to and spend time with that are selling systems that are in a way competing to what we do, but we don't look at each other as competitors, and we still feel that there's a large degree of sharing and community spirit in this movement.
Sharing on compete.
Yes.
We all know of each other.
Yeah.
We all know of each other, and we all say hello to one another. And when the need arises, if they hear of a project or if they hear of an opportunity that would work best with Aerospring Gardens, we definitely get a phone call from them, and vice versa. We would call them too.
Sure. I mean, so a little bit technical is that if I was to set up an indoor farm in Singapore in a factory building, I think the yield per square foot and what I would grow, I would probably not choose the Aerospring vertical system because it's hard to get light on all of the plants in an even spacing. It's easier to have shelf systems where you can adjust the height of the light and it's even. However, where this product and this type of growing really works well is when you use the sun as the light source, because the sun moves and it goes from left to right, and you will get light on both sides of the pole in any given day. And in those situations, the system is very, very, I would say even better than the shelf types of system, right? So if you're growing indoors, I would probably use a different technology, but on the rooftop, I would set up the Aerospring.
And on the basement, something else?
Something else. Maybe I'll have fish down there.
Okay.
The ideal city for me is that we already have these HDB government housing where some of them actually have either rooftops available or space available somewhere for community gardens. And I think setting up community farms, right, with a level of education where you teach the young or the old to become an urban farmer, they get sort of a driver's license for the farm. And then expanding those, so that would be farms that would have 20 to 50 of these poles, and they would be supplying fresh herbs and vegetables just to the building and just to the community where they are. And the same thing can go for condominiums, right? And you could even consider taking some of the public park areas. There's one park right behind us here, where you could make a quarter of that into an urban community farm that could be run by the government. And as the people in the community could come and either rent space to be able to grow there, I think that's the way to do it in small farms around the city, rather than larger farms outside of the city.
Gardening takes the stress out of life. It's quite meditative. To be around plants, to see how nature progresses. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end to a plant's life. And watching it blossom, watching it grow, it gives you a satisfaction, I think. And I think to share the fruits of your labor with your neighbor, with your friends, to cook something together with what you have grown, that is something that we should bring back. We should bring back that community feel of I'm growing more of this, you're growing more of this, let's exchange.
Yeah.
Let's
It's
make
very
a meal
therapeutic to garden as well. It de-stresses people. There is some deep-rooted sense of purpose and accomplishment in gardening and eating and growing your own food. No, it doesn't work. It doesn't work here at all. Even if you had more land, the quality of the soil here is not great for farming. It's clay. It's full of iron. It's red, and you would have to spend a lot of money on reconditioning the soil. And we have these torrential rains that can in 1 week can completely wipe out a field because all of the roots are dead. So yes, you need technology. Yes, you need things like the Aerospring to produce enough food with enough safety and margin to make it sustainable. For sure, we need this.
We're on the equator. The angle of the sun, the extreme temperatures that we have to put up with. Come May, June, July, the temperatures rise to 32, 34, 36 degrees. That is not good for growing food.